Motion in your step.
Motivation in your heart.
Hello, and welcome to today's Motion and Motivation podcast.
We've put together a study guide for everyone. If you need it, you can grab it from the video description.
Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving deep today into leadership, the kind that you see forged in really intense situations, combat situations. You know what I'm talking about. We're going to be talking about extreme ownership, the principle that is really pushed forward and championed by these Navy SEALs, Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, in their book of the same name. And what's fascinating about this book is that these battle-tested ideas that they put forward apply not just to the military, but to business and to teamwork.
Absolutely.
And to our personal lives. So are you guys ready to kind of see how this all works?
What's so compelling about extreme ownership is that it's not just this theoretical leadership book. It's really rooted in the realities of the battlefield.
Yeah.
And specifically, Willink and Babin, they draw on their experiences in Ramadi, Iraq, one of the most dangerous combat zones during the Iraq War.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Where the stakes were literally life and death.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when I first heard about this whole idea of extreme ownership, I was like, man, that sounds pretty intense. You know?
Yeah.
But the more I learn about it, the more I'm seeing how powerful it can be.
It is powerful, and I think that power is best illustrated through the stories in the book. And one that really stands out is this blue-on-blue incident, which essentially means friendly fire. So imagine you're a SEAL task unit commander. And you're in the middle of this chaotic firefight in Ramadi, and suddenly friendly fire breaks out, resulting in casualties.
I cannot even imagine the pressure and confusion of that situation.
Right.
Talk about a leader's worst nightmare.
Exactly. So in this case, the task unit commander was Leif Babin, and he was facing intense scrutiny. But instead of making excuses or blaming others, he did something incredible. He took full responsibility for the incident, even though it could have jeopardized his entire career.
That's a decision that must have taken immense courage. I'm curious, what was the reaction to that?
Well, it was a defining moment for him. His superiors recognized that his willingness to take ownership, to analyze what went wrong, to learn from those mistakes, ultimately made him a stronger leader.
Yeah.
And the story of Babin taking ownership illustrates the essence of extreme ownership. The idea that as a leader, you own everything in your world, even the mistakes of others.
It's a heavy responsibility, but it's also incredibly empowering in a way. It's like saying, I'm not going to let circumstances control me. I'm going to take control of the situation. Absolutely.
And that sense of ownership can be transformative, not just for the leader, but for the entire team.
Absolutely. And that actually brings to mind another big idea from the book. That is that there are no bad teams, only bad leaders. Makes you think, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever been a part of a team where things just weren't clicking, no matter how hard everyone tried?
Oh, yeah.
And then maybe there's a change in leadership and suddenly everything shifted.
Yeah, you're right to connect those dots. And the book uses this really vivid example from SEAL training to illustrate this point.
Okay.
So picture this. It's Hell Week, the most grueling part of SEAL selection.
Right.
And the instructors, they decide to swap the leaders of the worst performing boat crew and the top performing boat crew.
Oh, wow. Okay, so what happens?
Well, the crew that had been struggling with their new leader, they started winning.
Wow.
They went from being the worst to one of the best.
That's crazy.
And the crew that had been excelling, they actually started to fall behind under their original leader.
That is wild. That's an amazing illustration of just how much impact a leader can have.
Right.
It's not just about individual effort. It's about that environment and that culture that the leader creates.
Right, exactly. It shows that leadership, it's not about rank or personality. It's about taking ownership and setting the tone for the entire team.
It's about empowering your team to succeed.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've seen how extreme ownership kind of plays out on this individual level, like with Babin and taking responsibility for that blue-on-blue incident.
Right.
And we've seen it in the dynamics of teams, like with that boat crew swap during Hell Week. But how does this concept translate to larger, more complex organizations?
Well, that's where this concept of decentralized command comes in.
Okay.
So think about a situation, you've got SEAL sniper teams spread out across Ramadi, supporting Army units. Enemy snipers are active, tensions are high. There's a constant risk of friendly fire.
Yeah.
Now, in that kind of fast-moving, high-stakes environment, you can't have every decision going all the way up the chain of command.
No, there's just no time for that.
Yeah.
You need people on the ground who can make those quick, informed decisions.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of decentralized command.
Okay.
The SEAL platoon commanders in the book, they don't micromanage their teams. They empower their junior leaders to make decisions within their area of responsibility.
So it's about trust.
Mm-hmm.
Trusting that those people that you've trained and empowered are going to make the right call when things get real.
It's a key part of it. It's interesting to contrast this with how many businesses and organizations operate. You know, those top-heavy structures where every decision has to go through multiple layers of approval? That's the opposite of decentralized command.
Oh, I know all about that. I've been in those situations where it feels like decision-making gets so bogged down in bureaucracy, and it can be incredibly frustrating and inefficient.
It can stifle creativity and innovation.
For sure.
The SEALs recognize that to be successful in a complex, fast-paced environment, you need to push decision-making down to those who are closest to the action.
That makes me wonder, how do you ensure that those decentralized decisions are aligned with the overall mission?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like there's potential there for things to go off track if everyone's just doing their own thing.
That's a great question, and it leads to another crucial element of extreme ownership: clear communication and a shared understanding of the mission.
Okay, so how do the SEALs approach this?
Well, they emphasize the importance of leaders at all levels, clearly communicating the why behind the mission. These SEALs were risking their lives every day in Ramadi. They needed more than just orders. They needed to understand how their actions, even the smallest tasks, contributed to the larger strategic goal.
So it's about connecting the dots
Yeah.
between the day-to-day work and the big picture.
Yeah.
It's about giving people that sense of purpose.
Exactly. And it's about creating a culture where everyone feels ownership of the mission, not just following orders blindly.
Right.
And that's how you build trust.
Right.
And ensure that everyone is moving in the same direction, even when they're operating independently.
This is all making a lot of sense, but I've got to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed.
Sure.
All this talk of extreme ownership, decentralized command, clear communication, it seems like a lot to juggle, even outside of a war zone. How do you even begin to apply these principles in everyday life?
You know, that's a very common reaction. Even outside the intensity of combat, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by all the things we're trying to accomplish, both personally and professionally.
I feel that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in to-do lists.
Yeah.
And competing priorities.
And that feeling is exactly what Willink and Babin address with their principle, prioritize and execute.
Oh, okay. Tell me more about this, because prioritizing is a daily struggle for me.
They use a great example in the book of a CEO who is trying to do too many things at once. He's got ambitious plans, new training programs, website revamp, restructuring the sales force. But he's not making any real progress because he's spread too thin.
Oof, I know that feeling. You know, it's like that saying, if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority.
Exactly, and that's where prioritize and execute comes in. The CEO in this example realizes he needs to focus on the most important thing first. So he identifies one top priority: improving sales force effectiveness, and then he channels all of his energy and resources into achieving that one goal.
So it's about ruthlessly cutting away distractions.
Yes.
And focusing laser-like on what truly matters.
Exactly. It's about simplifying your goals, breaking them down into manageable steps, and then executing with discipline and focus. The amazing thing is that by prioritizing, you actually create more space for creativity and innovation because you're not constantly bogged down by distractions.
It's so true. I think we've all been in that situation where we have so much on our plates that we end up feeling paralyzed and we can't make any real progress.
Yeah, it's a common trap, but by applying prioritize and execute, we can reclaim our time and energy and start making real progress.
Now, this has been an incredible conversation, and I am already seeing how these principles can be applied in so many different areas of life. But there's one part that's still confusing me.
Okay, what's that?
Well, you mentioned that blue-on-blue incident where Babin described SEALs engaging this target that turned out to be an Iraqi soldier. But then I remember reading about SEAL operations to rescue Iraqi hostages. So I'm a bit confused. Were the SEALs fighting alongside Iraqi forces or against them?
That's a great question, and it really highlights the complexity of the situation in Ramadi. It wasn't this clear-cut us versus them scenario.
Right, okay.
It was much more nuanced than that. The insurgency in Iraq was multifaceted, with multiple factions and shifting alliances, and a lot of confusion on the ground. In some cases, the SEALs were working alongside Iraqi forces to try and help them build a more stable security apparatus. But at the same time, they were fighting against insurgent groups who were targeting both American and Iraqi forces.
Wow, that sounds incredibly challenging. Trying to navigate those shifting alliances and loyalties must have been so difficult.
It was, and it underscores the kind of demanding environment where the SEALs developed these principles of extreme ownership. They had to be adaptable and decisive and constantly aware of the shifting dynamics around them.
It makes you appreciate the mental and emotional fortitude they had to operate effectively in that chaos.
Absolutely, and that's what makes the lessons of extreme ownership so valuable. They were forged in the crucible of combat, but they're applicable to anyone facing challenging situations, whether it be in business or personal life, anywhere.
It's a powerful reminder that no matter how complex the situation is, we always have the power to choose how we respond, to take ownership, and to lead with courage and conviction.
Absolutely. And that's a perfect segue into the next part of our discussion, where we'll explore how the SEALs apply these principles to leading up and down the chain of command, a topic that's relevant to any organization, any team, regardless of the industry.
I'm ready to dive deeper, but before we do that, let's take a quick break.
Sounds good. We'll be right back to continue our exploration of extreme ownership.
So we talked about the core concept of extreme ownership and how that plays out in some pretty intense situations. But leadership isn't just about taking responsibility for what's right in front of you. It's also about navigating those complexities of communication and decision-making within a larger organization.
Yeah, you're right on the mark.
Okay.
And that's where this concept of leading up and down the chain of command comes in, which Willink and Babin emphasize as another crucial aspect of extreme ownership.
Okay, I'm really curious about this.
Yeah.
What does it even mean to lead up the chain of command? It seems like that could get you in trouble pretty quickly, overstepping boundaries.
Yeah, it definitely requires a delicate balance. But think about the SEALs in Ramadi. They're on the ground facing constant danger, and they've got these commanding officers who are often far removed from the immediate action.
Right.
Those commanders are still responsible for making these critical decisions and providing support, but they need accurate and timely information to do their jobs effectively.
Okay, so leading up is about making sure that those higher-ups in the chain have the information they need to make good decisions.
Exactly. And it's not always easy. The book describes how frustrating it could be for the SEALs to get bombarded with questions from their commanders, who sometimes seemed out of touch with the realities on the ground.
Yeah, I can imagine. You're in the heat of battle, risking your life, and someone's asking these questions that just seem pointless or irrelevant.
Right.
It would be so annoying.
It was a challenge, but what Jocko Willink realized was that their commanders weren't trying to micromanage or make their lives harder. They were just trying to get a clear picture of the situation so they could provide the necessary resources and support.
So it's kind of a communication breakdown, I guess.
In a way, yes. And the SEALs learned that they had to be proactive about keeping their commanders informed, providing detailed reports, and patiently answering questions, even when they felt like those questions were obvious or unnecessary.
It sounds like a real exercise in patience and understanding.
It was, but it was also a critical part of owning the mission. It was about recognizing that even though their commanders weren't on the front lines, they were still a part of the team, and they needed to be kept in the loop to make the best decisions for everyone involved.
It's a great point. It makes me think about times in my own life where I've just assumed that someone in a position of authority understood what was happening.
Right.
Only to find out later that they were totally out of the loop and then things went sideways,
Happens all the time. And it highlights the importance of clear communication and a willingness to take ownership, not just of our own tasks, but of the flow of information within the entire organization.
So leading up is about taking responsibility for making sure that everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
Even when it's challenging or frustrating.
Absolutely. It's about being proactive, communicating clearly, and building trust with those above you in the chain of command.
Now, on the flip side, we've got leading down the chain of command. What does that look like in the context of extreme ownership?
Well, it's about ensuring that your team understands the why behind their actions. Remember, these SEALs were risking their lives every day in Ramadi. They needed more than just orders. They needed context. They needed to understand how their missions, even the seemingly small and mundane tasks, contributed to that bigger strategic goal of stabilizing the city and protecting the population.
It's about giving people a sense of purpose,
Yeah.
showing them how their individual efforts make a difference in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly. It's about empowering your team by providing them with the information and context they need to make informed decisions and take ownership of their roles.
So it sounds like leading up and leading down are two sides of the same coin. They both require clear communication, a willingness to understand different perspectives, and a commitment to ensuring that everyone's working towards the same goals.
You got it. And when these two elements are working in harmony, it creates a culture of trust, accountability, and shared ownership that can lead to incredible results.
This is reminding me of that concept of decentralized command, where you're empowering those closest to the action to make decisions.
Right.
But there's a balance there, right? You still
Mhm.
need that strong, decisive leadership at the top. How do you kind of reconcile those two seemingly opposing ideas?
That's a great point. And that's where this chapter on decisiveness amid uncertainty comes in.
Okay.
The book highlights that even in the most chaotic situations, leaders need to be able to make quick, informed decisions, even when they don't have all the information.
But how do you make good decisions when you're dealing with so much uncertainty? It seems like there's always the risk of making the wrong call.
There's always a risk. But the SEALs emphasize the importance of gathering as much information as possible, assessing the situation, trusting your instincts, and then making a decision and moving forward. They describe a situation in Ramadi where a SEAL sniper spots a potential target, but it's unclear whether it's an enemy combatant or a civilian.
Oh, wow. That's an incredibly tough call. What happened?
In that situation, the sniper had to make a decision quickly, based on the very limited information that was available. And it really highlights that incredible pressure and responsibility that comes with leadership.
So it's about calculated risk-taking, knowing that you won't always have all the answers, but you still have to act decisively.
Exactly. And it's about being prepared to adapt and adjust your course of action as new information emerges.
That sounds like it applies to so many areas of life, not just the battlefield.
Yeah.
Whether you're an entrepreneur, launching a new product, a parent, making a decision about your child's education, there are always going to be unknowns.
Absolutely, you're right. And the key is to not let fear of making the wrong decision paralyze you. The SEALs, they teach us that it's better to make a decision, even if it's not perfect, than to be stuck in this state of indecision.
You know, it's making me think of that quote, "The only wrong decision is no decision at all."
I love that quote, and it's so true. Indecision can be far more costly than making a decision that turns out to be less than ideal.
Now, all this talk about decisiveness and taking action makes me think about another challenge that I face all the time, and that's overcomplicating things. I have this tendency to get bogged down in details and lose sight of the big picture. How do the SEALs handle that?
That's a great question, and it leads us to another one of their core principles: simple. Now, you might think that in this chaotic environment like war, simplicity would be impossible.
That's what I was thinking. It seems like it'd be the opposite of what you'd need in that situation.
But the SEALs found that overcomplicating things actually led to more mistakes and inefficiencies. They describe how early on in their deployment to Ramadi, their approach to evidence collection during raids was really disorganized. They would basically ransack a house, grabbing anything that looked important.
Okay, so they're just throwing everything in a bag and hoping for the best. That sounds kind of chaotic.
It was, and it wasn't very effective. They realized that they were missing crucial intelligence and putting themselves at greater risk by spending too much time on target.
So what do?
They implemented a more disciplined and systematic approach. They assigned specific roles to team members, established a clear chain of custody for evidence, and implemented this system for organizing and labeling everything they collected.
So by simplifying the process, they actually made it more effective.
Exactly. By bringing order to the chaos, they were able to gather more valuable intelligence, reduce the time spent on target, and minimize the risk to their team.
It's a powerful reminder that sometimes less is more, especially when you're dealing with those high-pressure situations. I think I need to put a sticky note on my computer that says, keep it simple.
I think we could all benefit from that reminder. It's so easy to get caught up in those complexities, but often the simplest approach is the most effective.
You know, we've talked a lot about those practical aspects of leadership, decision-making, communication, simplification. But there's also this deeper, more personal element that I'm curious about.
You mean that connection between discipline and freedom that we talked about earlier?
Yes. I'm still trying to wrap my head around this idea. How does embracing discipline actually lead to greater freedom?
Yeah, it might seem counterintuitive, but the SEALs found that the more discipline they cultivated in every aspect of their lives, from their training regimens to their meticulous gear prep, the more freedom they had to operate effectively under pressure. They weren't bogged down by indecision, disorganization, or self-doubt.
So they created this solid foundation of discipline that allowed them to be more adaptable and responsive in the face of challenges.
Exactly. They were free to focus on the mission at hand because they'd already mastered the basics.
It's making me think about my own morning routine. When I stick to a consistent routine, I feel so much more energized and focused throughout the day. But when I hit the snooze button and let things slide, I feel scattered and way less productive.
That's a perfect example. It highlights how even small, seemingly insignificant disciplines can have this ripple effect on our lives. By creating those positive habits and routines, we're essentially freeing up our mental and emotional energy to focus on the things that truly matter.
It's like that saying, freedom lies in being bold.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, it's freedom lies in being disciplined. It's about having that courage to create those structures in your life that will ultimately support your goals and aspirations.
Beautifully said. And that leads us to another fascinating aspect of leadership that Willing and Babin explore: the dichotomy of leadership.
Okay, this is a concept I've always found intriguing. It's that idea that effective leaders need to embody these seemingly opposing qualities.
Exactly. They have to be confident and humble, aggressive and patient, a leader and a follower. It's about recognizing that leadership isn't a fixed state. It's a dynamic process that requires constant adaptation and awareness.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act.
It is. And the book emphasizes that there's no one right way to lead. The best leaders are those who can adjust their approach depending on the situation and the needs of their team.
So it's about having the self-awareness to know what the situation demands and the flexibility to adapt accordingly.
Precisely. The book tells a story about this CEO who was struggling with a really difficult decision about shutting down a division of his company. He knew it was the right move financially, but he was hesitant because he was close friends with the head of that division.
Oh, that's tough. It's loyalty versus responsibility.
It was, and this is where the dichotomy of leadership comes into play. The CEO had to balance his personal feelings with his responsibility to the company as a whole. And ultimately, he realized that making that tough call, even though it's painful personally, was the best choice for the long-term health of the company.
Yeah, that must have been incredibly challenging. It takes a lot of courage to make those kinds of decisions.
It does, and it highlights the importance of emotional intelligence in leadership. It's not just about making the logical decision, it's about understanding the human impact of your choices and being able to navigate those complexities with empathy and compassion.
So the dichotomy of leadership is about recognizing that effective leadership requires a nuanced approach, a willingness to embrace ambiguity, and the courage to make those tough decisions even when they're unpopular or uncomfortable.
Yeah, you perfectly capture the essence of it. It's about finding that balance between seemingly opposing forces and adapting your style to fit the ever-changing demands of leadership.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I'm starting to see how these principles of extreme ownership can be applied in so many different areas of life, from the battlefield to the boardroom to even our personal relationships.
They truly are universal principles, and the beauty of extreme ownership is that it doesn't just provide a framework for thinking about leadership. It offers a practical roadmap for becoming more effective leaders, no matter what our role or context may be.
Now, I'm eager to hear more about how these principles play out in that crucial area of planning.
Planning is absolutely essential for success in any endeavor, and the SEALs have a lot to teach us about how to approach it with a mindset of extreme ownership.
All right, let's dive into that. But first, let's take a moment to process everything we've covered so far. We'll be right back to continue our exploration of extreme ownership.
All right, so we're back and ready to kind of tackle the final piece of this extreme ownership puzzle: planning. I have to admit, when I think about planning, I kind of think about, spreadsheets and to-do lists, not exactly, high-stakes military operations.
That's where you might be surprised. For the SEALs, planning is a matter of life and death. They take it incredibly seriously, and their approach, it actually has a lot to teach us, even if we're not facing enemy fire in our daily lives.
Okay, I'm interested to hear more about this. How does SEAL-style planning work? Is it all about, maps and tactical maneuvers and that sort of thing? It's definitely more than just drawing lines on a map. The SEALs, they emphasize the importance of a detailed and thorough planning process, even in the most time-sensitive situations. They describe spending hours, sometimes even days, meticulously planning these missions, considering every possible contingency and ensuring that everyone on the team understands the plan inside and out.
Man, that sounds intense. I can barely plan my grocery shopping list without forgetting something.
Well, it does require a lot of discipline and focus, but the payoff is huge. By investing that time up front to think through every detail, the SEALs were able to minimize risk and really maximize their chances of success.
So it's about being prepared for anything, anticipating those potential problems and having backup plans already in place.
Exactly. They talk about the importance of clearly identifying objectives, analyzing potential risks, developing multiple courses of action, and establishing a clear chain of command.
Sounds like they leave no room for error.
Well, they know that in combat, things rarely go according to plan. So they prepare for the unexpected by creating these flexible plans that can adapt to changing circumstances.
That makes me think about those stories you hear about really successful entrepreneurs who spent years meticulously planning their businesses before launching. Like, they're laying that groundwork for success, anticipating challenges and being prepared to pivot when they need to.
That's a great comparison. And just like entrepreneurs need to adapt to that ever-changing market, the SEALs had to be ready to adjust their plans on the fly as the situation in Ramadi was evolving.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that everyone on the team needs to understand the plan. How do they ensure that level of buy-in and shared understanding?
Well, the book really highlights the importance of involving the entire team in the planning process. They describe how they would encourage even the most junior SEALs to contribute ideas and ask questions.
So it's not just the leaders kind of dictating the plan, it's a collaborative process.
Exactly. They create a culture of ownership and shared responsibility where everyone feels empowered to contribute.
That makes sense. If everyone feels like they had a voice in creating the plan, they're going to be more invested in its success.
Precisely. And that collaborative approach actually leads to better plans, greater buy-in, and ultimately a more effective team.
This is reminding me of that lesson about leading down the chain of command, ensuring that everyone understands the why behind their actions and not just blindly following orders.
You got it. The planning process is that perfect opportunity to communicate the mission objectives, explain the rationale behind the plan, address any concerns that the team might have, and really make sure that everyone is on the same page.
So planning isn't just about logistics. It's really about leadership. It's about bringing the team together, creating a shared understanding, and building that foundation of trust and ownership that's so crucial for success.
I love how you put that. Beautifully said. All this emphasis on communication during the planning stage underscores another key principle of extreme ownership.
You mean clear and effective communication?
Exactly. The SEALs, they emphasize the importance of clear, concise, and timely communication, especially in those high-pressure situations. They describe how even a slight misunderstanding or a delay in communication could have these devastating consequences on the battlefield.
So it's about eliminating ambiguity, making sure that everyone's on the same page, and avoiding those miscommunications that can lead to mistakes and wasted effort.
Exactly. They talk about using precise language, confirming understanding, and repeating back key information to ensure that everyone's aligned.
That's a valuable skill in any context, not just in war. Think about all the miscommunications that happen in everyday life at work or in relationships. It's usually a breakdown in communication. I know I'm guilty of just assuming that people understand what I'm thinking, which often backfires.
Oh, we've all been there. The SEALs remind us that clear communication is a discipline that requires constant practice and attention. It's about being mindful of how we're conveying information, actively listening to others, and clarifying anything that's unclear.
It's about taking responsibility for making sure that our message is received and understood, not just throwing words out there and hoping for the best.
Absolutely. And, ultimately, that's what extreme ownership is all about. Taking responsibility for every aspect of our world, from our own actions to the performance of our team to the communication that flows throughout the organization.
This has been an awesome deep dive into extreme ownership. It's inspiring to see how these SEALs face these incredible challenges in Ramadi, but those lessons they learned about leadership, ownership, responsibility, and resilience, those are universal.
They are, and what's so powerful about extreme ownership is that it's not just a book, it's a call to action. It challenges us to step up and to take ownership of our lives and our work, and to lead with courage and conviction.
It's a powerful reminder that we all have that potential to be leaders in our own way and to make a positive impact on the world around us. And if you're ready to take on that challenge, I highly encourage you to check out Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. It's a journey worth taking.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. That way you won't miss any of our updates. Also, if you think this video could help others, please share it with them. Thanks for watching and for your support.